Hey, this is John. Welcome back to Modern Old School Developer. In this episode, we're going to start working on an automated testing suite for the backend. I like to update the SQL Alchemy code to use the new 2.0 API, as this will allow us to do async database access down the line. This integrates really well with FastAPI. But this is a major refactor, and I want to make sure I don't introduce any bugs while I'm updating the code. The best way to ensure that is to have a good test suite. So let's get started. All right, back in VS Code, let's make our first test. I'm going to start by making a test package, so I'll need a dunder init.py file. Next, we're going to make a module to have test functions inside it. All of these modules that are test modules need to start with test underscore. That's how pytest finds them. So test underscore package is what I'm going to name mine. And then to make a test function, all you have to do is make a function that starts with test underscore. I'm going to call this one test underscore package version. I'm going to test the package version is correct. So let's import the version. And then to make a test, all we have to do is assert that something is true. So I'm going to assert that the version is 222. So let's go see if this actually works. Let's go to the command prompt. If you don't have pytest installed, you should install it now. So you need to do pip install pytest and pytest mock if you're in a virtual environment. If you're using Poetry, you can do poetry add-d pytest mock. Now, I already have these things, so it's already fine for me, but if you don't have them, you can also do pip install requirements dev-text if you're using a virtual environment, or the same thing, just poetry install from here. And that will install everything you need for the virtual environment. Okay, so if you are in a virtual environment or have pytest installed globally, you should be able to do python-m pytest. However, I'm not in a virtual environment. I have it installed with Poetry, so I need to do poetry run python-m pytest. It's going to fail. Now, I could have done poetry shell, and then I could do python-m pytest, and it worked the same way. But I'm not going to do the shell. I'm just going to run with poetry run. So there we go. But hey, our assertion failed. Our testing failed. Well, that's fine. I didn't expect it to work because I know the version is wrong. Now, it's not wrong here. This is the version that it's supposed to be right now, but it is not at the moment. So let's go ahead and fix that back in init.py. So our package version should be 222. So now when we go back over here, we can do poetry run python-m pytest, and you can see our test pass. Now, if you're using VS Code, you can go over here to this beaker and run test as well. I can go ahead and hit play on here. It'll run all the tests it finds in our entire hierarchy. And you can even run individual test functions, or all the tests in a module or a package, or even a packages package. So VS Code is very helpful for doing that. You can even run them right over here. If I hit play over here, yeah, there we go. It's fine now. So VS Code is very handy for running tests. So I'll probably be using that rather than going back to the command line. But like I said, you can always use the command line to run python-m pytest, with or without Poetry, if you have Poetry installed. All right, so that's a good first test. What else might we want to test? Since I plan to refactor the database code, we'll probably want test for the database functions. Most of those are inside the CRUD module, so let's make a test function for addActor. Now, how are we going to call the addActor function? We're going to need a database session. Now, how do we get one of those? Well, normally they come from one of our API endpoints in one of these depends calls. But we're not calling this function. We are calling the addActor function directly. So we need to already have the database session. So how can we get one of those? Well, they come from getDBSession. So that's in the database object. And all it does is use this factory object to yield a database instance or a session instance. So that seems fine. So all we need to do is set up the factory, which is done with the init database function. So the only quirk here is we need to supply a path to our SQLite database. and I want to use a temporary path to make sure we don't interfere with any production databases or any file system that I, don't want to be there permanently. So let's mock the functionality of this getSQLite path function to supply a temporary path we can use to make our database at. Unfortunately, I kind of hard-coded this extra slash here, so I can't use a memory database here without changing the code. Now, we could change the code and that would be fine, but I don't want to right now. So I'll just mock this function to supply a temporary path and use a file database. All right, so back in our test package, let's make a new package here, or a new module. So I'll call it testcrud.py. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to import pytest. And then from pytest mock, I want to import mocker fixture. This will allow us to mock the functionality. Then we're going to import the CRUD functions. And from database, I want to import getDatabaseSession and init database. So the first thing I need to do is I need to have database session. I want my database to be used. I want the same one for all the functions in this module. So I need to make something that will create our database session one time. And to do that, we're going to make a pytest fixture. So we need to do @pytest.fixture. And then the scope is going to be module. I want to run this once for our module. And I want to tell it always use this automatically. So I'll set auto use to be true. Now I'm going to say define setup database. And we're going to need a temp path. So we can use a built-in fixture from pytest, the temp path factory. And I need the module mocker from pytest mock, and it's a mocker fixture. Now, they do have a monkey patch fixture inside pytest, but it does not work at module scope, which is why I'm using pytest mock here instead. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get a path. So let's say from pathlib import path. And then I will say path, this is a path object, equals temp path factory dot make temp database, and we'll add db SQLite 3 to the end of that for our file. All right, next I want to mock that SQLite path function, the get SQLite path. Now this is kind of confusing, a little bit tricky, but you need to mock the actual path where things are. So I am calling the get SQLite path function. Now that comes from the config module. So you might think we would mock the config package's get SQLite path, but no, that's not what we're doing. We're not mocking a function, we're mocking a namespace function. And the namespace is database. We imported it with a from. Now, if we'd done import config and then called, if we'd done from .import config and then we'd done config get SQLite path, then we would mock SQLite path in the config. But because we imported the function, that is part of the database module right here. So we need to mock this namespace right here. So we're going to say module mocker.patch. And we're going to patch the string moviemanager.database.getSQLite path, not moviemanager.config. And then I'm going to say I want the return value to be our path.asPOSIX. There we go. So now it's going to return the full path as a POSIX path right here to our SQLite database. Next, I can call initDB, and now we'll have our database initialized. So that looks pretty good. So what do we need to do next? Well, now we need to get a session. So we're going to use another pytest fixture. This time, we'll need any arguments here. So by default, the scope is function. that means this will be called every time you use it inside a function. So we're going to use setup and tear this down every time. This is similar to our depends we use in our API endpoints. So let's say def db, and I'm going to say yield from get db session. Now our get db session object is a generator. It's yielding a database connection. So I can't say return getDB session because that's going to return a generator function, which is not what we want. I want to yield the next value from getDB session. So there we go. Now we have database. And now we can test our add actor function. So again, these aren't test functions. These are fixtures. They're just setup functions. But what I want to do is I want to test the add actor function. So let's try that right here. Define test add actor. Now, to get this database session, I'm going to need to reuse this database fixture. And to do that, all I have to do is supply it as an argument. PyTest has already known it's a fixture and will supply this argument because it has the same name as this function. So I'm going to get this as a database session right here. Okay, so right over here, we can call whatever we want. So I can say actor equals crud.addActor, and we can give it the database. And then our actor will be, I don't know, Josh Hartnett. And there we go. So we have now got that. So let's make sure that everything looks good over here. I can assert that actor.id equals 1. And I can also assert that actor.name equals Josh Hartnett. Or I can make the test fail by making sure it doesn't run intentionally. So there we go. We have our first function. So let's see what happens. If I hit play, okay, our thing failed, and our assertion failed. Josh Hartnett is not equal to Josh Hartnett. Perfect. That looks like what we wanted to happen. So if I go close this and do this, will it run now? Yep, everything looks fine. And if I did this over here, the exact same thing. We ran our 2 tests. Now notice we ran both tests over here. I would have to specify options to run just the one test that I wanted. But right over here, I can just hit play right here. It tests one function. If I did play up here, you'd see it did 2 of 2 tests pass. It's running those other tests I didn't need to run. So this is fine now. If I go back over here, you can see inside temp, there we go, pytest of my username and pytest current and database current. There we go. There's our SQLite database. So if I did SQLite 3 to that path, temp pytest of me, pytest current, database current, there we go. We've got our actor. So it did make this. And you can see there are 4 things in there. That's, I think, what it keeps right now. If I go look in there, yeah, it keeps a few tests running at a time. But it will delete them. You can see I'm up to test 80 right now, but it started at 1 and went up. It's just going to keep numbering these until it, I don't know, rolls over or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just, these are temp files. Doesn't matter what happens to them. They'll be deleted later on. We don't have to worry about that. So there we go. There is our first test. All right, let's add another test function. Let's say test get actor this time. Give it a DB session. And let's say crud.getActor. And I want to get the first actor. We know it's actor ID 1, so we can get that in there. And then all we have to do is assert that actor's name is Josh Hartnett. So will this work? Let's find out. If I hit play over here, it does not work. None type has no attribute name. What happened over there? Well, if I rerun pytest here, everything works. All right, what's going on there? Well, the problem is we have a blank database. If I run this test independently without running this one, it's not going to work. It will run the test in the order they're defined. So when I run all the tests, we already have Josh Hartnett in here, and we can do that. So if I hit play on this module, yeah, everything works. But I can't play just this individual function. So it might be nice to have some seed data for our database to know it's in a consistent state where we can get actors. So how can we do that? Well, there are a couple of things we could do. We do have our database already in here. We could get database session right here. So we could say next get db session, and then let's do crud.addActor db with Josh Hartnett. Okay, will this work? Didn't mean to do that. Let's find out. If I hit play over here, does it work? Yeah, that works fine. What about this one? Ah, that one fails now. We have a duplicate entry exception. That's a problem. We can't add Josh Hartnett twice to the database. That's not going to work out. So what else could we do? Well, if we already had a SQLite database, we could use that to seed our information. So rather than making several calls to the functions, which we're trying to test anyway, and that wouldn't work out so well because I can't verify they work if I have to use them in order to make sure they work. So instead of doing that, I'm going to seed the database with a SQL file. So I went ahead and went with a blank database and set up this in the front end. I've got a bunch of movies, a bunch of actors, categories, studios, etc. They're all good in here. And I use SQLite to dump that to a SQL file. So right over here, I've got data init.sql. So we've got a bunch of actors in here, categories, yada, yada. All this is nice and available. So let's go ahead and use that to seed our database rather than making stuff up like this. So to do that, first I'm going to want to import SQLite 3. Then before we have our database, I want to need to get the path to our init.sql. So there is a request feature or fixture we can use, and that will help us get the path to this particular file. And we can use that to build the path to init.sql. Because unfortunately, I can't open just data/init.sql because we may be running this test from different places. So it's not really consistent where it's going to find it at. I need the full absolute path. So let's say that connection equals SQLite3.connect. And we will connect to our path. This is our test database. This will create it. And then I need a file name. And I'm going to say that my file name is going to be a path object with request.fspath. And I want the parent of that. I don't want the module name. I want the parent directory. Then I'm going to add data, and I'm going to add init.sql. There we go. There's our file name. So with open file name for reading as f, I'm going to say, no, that's not right, connection dot execute script, and I'm going to execute the script that's in f.read. So I'll read everything in that SQL file and read that as a script. There we go. Now I have some data seeded. So is this going to work? Well, let's find out. If I go over here, what's going to happen? Ah, it fails. 15 is not 1. Okay, that makes sense. Our 1 is no longer Josh Hartnett. It's probably going to be 15. So let's try that. All right, yeah, that works. Does this still work? No, it doesn't. Actor 1 is Christian Bale. So let's go back to our init.sql. So if actor 1 is Christian Bale, let's go ahead and make sure it actually is. There we go. Yeah, there we go. We have been able to get this actor in here. Now, we don't really care what the actor ID is over here. We only care that it exists. So we can just get rid of this test right now. But what I might want to do is actually verify that it added it to the database. And to do that, I need to get it back from the database. So why don't we try doing that as well? Let's say actor2 equals crud.getActor database actor.id. I should have an ID in here, and it should be Josh Hartnett. So I should be able to assert that actor name is Josh Hartnett. I should be able to assert that actor2.name is also Josh Hartnett. I know I misspelled that. I'm doing it on purpose. And of course, it's not right. It's not Josh and Hartnett. It's just Josh Hartnett. And when I do that, everything should work again. All right, perfect. Is there anything else we might want to test? Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Maybe we want to get the actor by name instead. Let's make a third test. Let's test get actor by name. And let's say actor is going to be crud get actor by name. And let's get Robin Williams. Let's do this real quick. And let's assert that actor.name equals name. And we even know it will be ID2 right over here. So we can even assert that actor.id equals 2. And that should be correct. So let's see if that all works. Ah, it doesn't. And the answer is, I forgot to send the session. I didn't have the code right. Try it again. There we go. Now it is proper. So you have to call your functions correctly, but if you do, it should all work. So yes, we know we had C data, and we know we could get the actor by name or by ID. And we can get that the actor's name in DB1 is actually working. All right, that sounds pretty good. Now, what about that exception we had earlier? What if we had that actor that was duplicated? Could we do something with that? Well, why don't we try that out? Test add actor duplicate db. So let's say actor equals crud dot add actor, and let's add someone we know should be here. Let's add Tom Hanks. So if I add Tom Hanks, actor.name equals Tom Hanks. And if I hit play, what's going to happen here? We get that duplicate session again. Do we? No, we don't. I always forget that. Do we get it now? Yes, there we go. We got a duplicate entry exception. Well, that's not going to work for us. So how do we handle those problems? Well, pytest has a thing to work with that. All we have to do in here is say with pytest.raises, and we need to get our exceptions. Let's go ahead and do that real quick from import duplicate entry exception. So there we go. And then we'll put the actor right in here. And then we're going to assert this, but it's not going to work because we won't actually get there. So if we go right down there, does it work now? Hey, there we go. Everything passes. Now our actor name, this never got called. This raised an exception. It was expected, so it's fine. So I can just get rid of all of this, and I get rid of this. So there we go. We can't add a duplicate Tom Hanks, and that's just what I expected. Could we do anything else that's over here? What else might be in the CRUD package? What else might we raise in one of the get calls? If we get actor by name, it's going to return none right now. So let's make sure that works as well. So let's do define test get actor not found. Okay, so we can do actor equals crud.getActor by name, and we can just put in gibberish, and we can assert actor is none. There we go. Someday I'm going to remember that. I really am. I don't know when that day's coming, but I'm sure it's coming soon. Okay, there we go. We asserted actor is none. Perfect. So if we did is not none, could we do that? Yeah, and it fails because it definitely is none. There we go. So there's how we can search for nones, and we can handle exceptions, and we can test different things, and we can see our database values. So yeah, I think that's looking pretty good for what we're doing so far. So I think it's a good wrapping up point for today's episode. Hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Come back and see us next time. And thanks for watching.